of all, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for being here. My name is Madigan Johnson. I'm a program manager at Data Friendly Space, and I'm really glad that you've joined us here today. So welcome to the webinar called Failing Forward. We called it this because we genuinely believe that one of the most useful conversations in our sectors are the ones where we don't have enough. The ones where someone kind of puts up their hand and says, actually, that didn't go the way we planned. Here's what we wish we known. So today is kind of exactly that. So together with the Goal Innovation Lab at Goal Global, we've brought together a group of practitioners to talk about, the projects that hit the walls, the tools that maybe didn't land the way they were expected, the learnings that we've encountered, and how as a sector we move forward from here. So at Data Friendly Space, we'll be sharing kind of our own experiences with Gannett, kind of what we underestimated, what we'd approach differently. And we'll also hear from colleagues at ALNAP, Kobo, Devine Organic Foods, each bringing their own perspective. So we welcome you. We hope this feels less like a webinar and more like a conversation. So please, let's use the chat to ask questions, share your own experiences, and yeah, let's dive into it. We can go to the general housekeeping now. So just some housekeeping rules for this session. So the session is being recorded. Please use the chat to share your thoughts and questions. We read everything, and you're also welcome to engage with others. The Q&A is also open, so please submit your questions at any time via the chat. We'll be monitoring it there. Right now, all of you are on mute, but the speakers and moderators will be live. So yeah, please just keep yourself on mute so there's no background noise. And we'll try to wrap up in 30 minutes. We'll try not to spend too much time so that we can also answer your questions, or you can share some of your own reflections. So that being said, I would like to introduce Elizabeth Devine, who is the head of Goal's program technical team at Goal Global, to introduce herself and the other our speakers. Over to you, Liz.
Thanks so much, Madigan. Hi, everyone. My name is Liz Devine. I'm the head of Goal's program technical team. So we provide support to all of our country teams in terms of design and implementation of humanitarian projects. And I'll be your moderator today. First things first, over 170 people have registered for the webinar called Failing Forward, which that alone, I think, tells us something. Either the sector has a very healthy relationship with failure, or we're all quietly desperate to talk about it. And I suspect it's more of the latter. And here's the proof. We ran a campaign before this event asking people to submit their own failure stories. We got zero, not one. People will tell you everything that went wrong over a bad cup of conference coffee, but ask them to put it on the record, and suddenly we don't have anything to share. That tension between knowing failure matters and the system that punishes you for admitting it is exactly what we're here to dig into today. There's going to be no slides, no polished takeaways, but instead what we have here is a group of people who've agreed to be honest in public, which is rarer than it should be. I'll let them introduce themselves, but I can tell you the stories will range from using AI tools, meeting the chaos of real field environments, to an ironfish that community in northern Uganda wasn't ready to trust, to 20 years of humanitarian learning research that keeps arriving at the same conclusions. So let's get into it. I'd like to invite each of our speakers to introduce themselves with the sentence with your name, organization, and your role. Nothing more for now. We'll hear plenty more from you shortly. So maybe Juliet, we'll start with you.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. I'm Juliet Parker. I'm the director of ALNAP, which is the learning network for the humanitarian sector. I'm really delighted to be joining today. Shall I pass to Tino?
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, nice to meet everyone. Excited to be here today to talk about failure. Tino Kreutzer, Chief Operating Innovation Officer at Cobos.
Great. Welcome, Tino. Noela, over to you next.
Thank you. Hello and greetings from Uganda. Noela Ojara is my name, founder and managing director of Devine Organic Foods. It's a private sector SME in Uganda. Thank you.
Thanks, Noela. And José, over to you.
Thanks, everyone. Well, my name is José Cobos. I work as a head of innovation for Data Friendly Space, an NGO focused on AI, technology, and analytics, and I'm based in southern Spain, in Cobos. Very glad to be here today.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, everyone. So let's set the stage. We're going to start with a question that might seem basic, but I think is worth sitting with for a moment, because I suspect that everyone in the room is going to answer this one slightly differently. So an open question for all of you. How do you define innovation in your context? And how is it different from how other sectors might define it? In a sector where the stakes are human lives and the resources are scarce, does the word innovation even fit? So Juliet, let's start with you.
Sorry, I'm sorry, my Wi-Fi just blanked out. Sorry, could you say that again?
No problem, no problem. How do you define innovation in your context, and how is it different from how other sectors might define it? And in a sector where the stakes are human lives and the resources are scarce, does the word innovation even fit?
Cool. So, I mean, in ALNAP, we focus on learning. And so our mandate is to look at learning and improve performance across the humanitarian sector. And really, innovation is interesting. Over ALNAP's history over the last 27 years, our mandate has been interpreted differently at different times. You know, at the beginning, it was all about evaluation. Now it's really about kind of knowledge equity. But there was a bit in the middle where actually innovation was a totally critical part of learning. You know, there was this sense that we'd kind of got as far as we could with our standard approaches to work, and there needed around the World Humanitarian Summit to be this particular injection and focus on innovation in order to be able to unlock a step change in the performance of the humanitarian sector. And since that point, really over the last 10 years, I think there's been a lot of learning about where the accelerators and blockages to innovation and innovative approaches have been able to support improved performance and where they've been blocked. So for us, coming from the ALNAP perspective, it's really about how innovation is one of the tools within the learning kind of component to be able to unlock these step changes in performance.
That's great. Thanks, Juliet. And Tino, we'll go to you next for some reflections.
Those are great thoughts. Yeah, I guess from our side, especially when the technology angle comes in at Kobo, with KoboToolbox, that's what we've mostly focused on. But I would say for us, innovation is not synonymous with what I guess most of the private sector technology companies would call innovation. It's not the idea that we capture the market as quickly as possible, be disruptive. I think for us, innovation is actually using the tools we have, using the knowledge that our users in the field, in humanitarian space already possess, and making sure that we build something that is durable, that is reliable and safe and secure. And I think sometimes those kinds of tools take more time to build. They sometimes take more money to build. But at the end of the day, to us, that's real innovation, is actually reusing what we already have. For people who are familiar with the Apollo 13 movie, the idea where you dump all the things on the table and make use of the few things that you have, even though they don't seem like they could get the job done. To us, that's humanitarian innovation. That's not looking for the shiniest, most disruptive things that could perhaps get you a big valuation, but rather helping everyone use what they already have so that there's no need for retraining or costly investments in new technologies.
Thanks very much, Tina. And Noela, we'll turn it over to you next.
Thank you. So coming from the private sector and SME, we define innovation as co-creating solutions with communities that are practical. These are services and products that are practical, but also nutrition sensitive and very sustainable. So we provide products and services that address nutrition needs in the communities, and by working together with the communities to ensure that we have that product and service to deliver their needs, but should be sustainable. That's how we define innovation at Devine Organic Foods.
Thanks very much, Noela. And José, over to you for your reflections.
Sorry. Some of the reflections have already been shared, and then thanks, Tino, for that, because for us as an NGO that actually does tech, usually the innovation is not focused on the technology itself. What might seem like super innovative for non-technical people. For us, it's not the core of it, and we sit somewhere in the middle because as a tech company, we don't benchmark only checking on speed and accuracy on markets, but also as an NGO, we need to help colleagues and communities to alleviate suffering, but from the data point of view, which is really not usually easy. So we do not only need to build with and for others, but also we need to create some degree of trust that needs to be innovative for sure, and also to help others understand what data can do in a sector that is so close to actual and to actual suffering. So I think that would be innovation for me.
Thanks very much, Jose. We got some great definitions for innovation across the board. So now let's look at what innovation actually looks like on the ground. What would be one innovation that your teams are most excited about right now? And why should the person most affected by a crisis care about that innovation? Jose, should we start with you?
All right. So again, and for some context, we're an NGO that basically we create platforms, we create tools, software, and we do analytics. We work with data. So yeah, if you see that and you see our definition as an organization, yeah, it seems like innovative in a way. And but yeah, we do IT. So if you ask me from a technical point of view, I would say, okay, being able to query and to ask massive data sets, with just regular words is impressive. Okay, and I would not see myself a few years back able to do that. A person with no knowledge of any statistical software just asking data and getting answers is great. However, we as tech providers realize that that was for granted. That was something that was given for granted. However, I think that our main innovation, or I would say the thing we're mostly excited about, is a program that we started. We were struggling with adoption, with trust, and sustainability on tech, which is something that needs to be considered. And we came up with a program that works with a network of professionals that devote their time to maintain and to improve these tools. And we found ourselves actually finding the most innovative aspect of our work in the last few months on something that is absolutely non-technical.
That's great. Thanks very much, Jose. And Tino and Noela, can we hear from you as well?
Yeah, I guess.
Thank you. Tino, you want to go first?
Noela, sorry, I thought I heard Tino. So go ahead, Noela, please.
All right, thank you. So from our side, what we are excited about is one of our new products, which is an instant composite vitamin A porridge flour. This flour is made out of biofortified foods. That's the orange flesh sweet potato, the orange maize, and soy to bring in the protein. And this particular product has been classified by our National Drug Authority, that's Uganda National Drug Authority, as a food supplement, but also certified by our standards body. It's addressing the vitamin A deficiency crisis in the country. And why vitamin A? Because lack of vitamin A in the body, particularly for children below 2 years, affects them, blindness often. And as stated by the World Health Organization, 50% of these children who go blind also die in the next 1 year of their life. Vitamin A deficiency also causes lack of immunity, and this makes the children very susceptible to upper and lower tract infections. And this is a killer really for the children based on World Health Organization statistics, yeah? But also because the lack of vitamin A in a mother of reproductive age also has impact on the child they are carrying in the womb, but also the child that they're breastfeeding. So for our innovative nutritious porridge, having the biofortified food supplement makes us feel as a team quite happy because we have made it affordable, we have made it accessible, and we have made it safe for all the vulnerable communities to access. and therefore contributing to wiping out vitamin A deficiency in Uganda.
Thanks very much,
you.
Noela. Thanks, Noela. It's an exciting project to be working on. Thanks. And Tino, over to you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I guess for us, one of the things we're most excited about is at the moment we're using a lot of our new speech recognition and automatic AI analysis features that we've been building for years, and we've been planning for even longer, long before there was ChatGPT. We were trying to see where does this artificial intelligence perhaps come in to help us collect more qualitative data, and that's essentially what we tried to build. We have so many organizations that relied on Kobo to collect quantitative data, lots and lots, millions of surveys, because it was so easy and fast. But what we heard over and over is that many organizations were yearning for that deeper understanding of what does an affected population truly need. And sometimes maybe the solution is clear, maybe vitamin A deficiency is the solution, but how do you address it? How do you overcome rumors, hesitancy, misconceptions? How do you address these? And so we built these features into Kobo to allow users to not only collect open-ended responses with audio, but then have the ability to transcribe massive numbers of transcriptions with humans in the loop, so that you can always achieve 100% accuracy, because the AI is never 100% accurate, and then use other AI tools for doing the rapid analysis, so essentially qualitative coding. And then what we've done over the years, as we said earlier, we don't try to do this fast. We don't want to be the first, but we want to be the safest option out there. So then we've done a lot of evaluations and testing and working with different partners to try to see how different dialects, recording qualities, and so on would affect that. And yeah, I guess we found that it's sometimes really difficult to control that if the person recording this in a noisy environment uses this, then sort of affects the quality tremendously. But to us, that's what we're most excited about, and we see this as a big change in not just how we conduct surveys, but how we interact with affected populations to not try to fit everyone into a checkbox anymore.
That makes sense. And I mean, you're talking about ideas that are hitting the kind of the messy and unpredictable realities of the field environments. So are there other assumptions that you've held with real confidence that the operational context just kind of completely dismantled? And what did that feel like for you and your teams?
For us? Yeah, I guess I'm alluding it to a little bit, because the truth is we never expected the quality to be 100%. In some ways, we've now found that the tools are way better than we thought. In some ways, the qualitative analysis driven by really good open weights LLMs are tremendously good and much better than we actually thought even just a few months ago. But yeah, in terms of hitting the messy field realities, what we found is that we started. This was a large survey, for example, that we did with partners in the Middle East across 14 countries, lots of local Arabic dialects, and initial testing showed the results were quite good. Always some correcting needed, but pretty good quality. But then as it rolled out, you let go. You don't conduct every training. There's training of trainers, and eventually data collection happens on the ground. And what we saw after a few months is that the quality dropped off tremendously. And it wasn't that it was going into populations with perhaps stronger accents and so on. It was that during the training process and training of trainers and so on, the requirements that you use good audio equipment, that you use a non-noisy environment, those things have fallen off from the instructions. And so therefore the quality of audio dropped, therefore the quality of speech recognition decreased as well. And so that's what we saw. Technology was doing its job, but how we use the tools and how we train people and rely on different technologies, as we heard from ALNAP, like education is the ultimate innovation. That's what failed us, and so we should have spotted this earlier and found the reason that this is sort of how our different organizations were dropping the requirement that good audio equipment and especially quiet environments was the key to having good qualitative data here.
That's great. Thanks very much, Tino. José, in some of the kind of the discussions you've had, you've described failure as information, but information only has value if people are willing to surface it. So how do you build a culture where teams document failure honestly rather than quietly burying it and moving on?
Thanks, Liz. Well, there is something on the nature of our organization, like bugs, failure, and feedback loops are like the day-to-day on any IT development. So for us, it's all right. We don't feel guilty if our software needs to improve, if feedback is hard on that. And actually, we do document and we make it public. This year, for example, we had a session with the colleagues from Kobo on actually that, like, surfacing issues that arose from our own tools. So we were actually exposing a few issues that we identified in our tool Ganet and how we actually overcame those. So not only we went public on speaking about it, but recently we've applied, and today they communicated that we'll have our paper published on that. On failures, like real life examples. Most of them happened in deployments in Myanmar and in Palestine, and basically we were open about it. Like there is no way data or software or analytics get better, especially if we involve technology, if we're not open about those. I think that requires like a cultural change in a way. We can talk about that later, and organizations need to stop. Actually, it should never be a penalty, being public about issues. And again, if we see the culture of GitHub, for those who are a bit familiar with it, but basically it's a repository. It's a shared space on which we all share those resources, those learnings, so the best things can be replicated and the errors not repeated again. So yeah, I think that's our main approach there.
Great, thanks very much, Jose. Noela, can you take us to a specific moment, not a vague lesson, but a real one, where something that you tried in your supply chain or with a community partner failed, and tell us what it actually forced you to change?
We tried in 2024 using official data from the Ministry of Health in Uganda, which stated that 49% of people living in Agago were iron deficient. And this brought the concept and the introduction of the lucky iron fish by Gulf in Uganda office. And we, as the private sector partner, were then brought in to come and implement this innovation in Agago. So indeed, it was very exciting. It was a very exciting project because the lucky iron fish itself is an innovation made from food grade iron. And when introduced either in water or in food, which is having a level of acidity, it should admit iron into that food. And so we got ready and up to Agago. And yes, indeed, we had to ask ourselves certain tough questions, because the concept was we were to sell the lucky iron fish to the communities in Agago. And it was approximately one ingot was about $8 for the community of Agago, one that had suffered a number of challenges and crises, and also the backlog of the 21-year war in northern Uganda. So we had to think and ask ourselves as a team these tough questions. Will they afford to purchase? Is this ingot culturally acceptable for us if we were to introduce it to the communities to use it for their cooking? And how would the community do they really need this intervention, the lucky iron fish? So immediately we had to do a number of things. One, we had to do food testing. Are the foods that the communities consume, do they really lack iron? Because we were bringing in an innovation to introduce iron into their food, because statistics already showed that 49% of the community were iron deficient. So we tested their food. We picked samples from the community of the food, and one set of the samples had an introduction of the lucky iron fish, and another set was just the normal food that is consumed and how it's prepared. We also mimicked how it is prepared in the community. When we took these to the labs and the laboratories in Kampala, it agreed that yes, one, the food that the communities were consuming had iron, even without the introduction of the lucky iron fish. And the food that we introduced, the lucky iron fish, showed an increase of iron in this food. So that made us take another step and say, let's try the water. How is the water? So we got the samples of potable water from different communities that we are going to work with under the project, and did the same tests using standards, the East African potable water standards. Our discovery, again, which wasn't shocking now, because the reports showed that there was actually iron in the water, and a lot of iron in some instances, which was far above what was even recommended for human consumption as per the standard. So we sat down, and this already showed us that we needed to redesign the intervention. But nevertheless, in also part of the innovation was the use of the Massimo evasive device, which showed in real time, if tested, the individual would either have low iron, which is already anemia, or has the normal amount of iron, as recommended again by the World Health Organization. So with this, selected community members who were termed as most vulnerable were chosen, and we used this device to just check what are the levels of iron in their blood. And again, analyzing the data using CDC standards, it found that most of those who were tested were 90% at normal range of iron in their blood. So we noted that even as we were to move, we had to redefine our strategy. In the immediate, it was a little bit, we faced resistance, because here was a concept that was well developed and funding had been got for this concept, but the data on ground was not exactly that. But as we kept on engaging with the different stakeholders, then we realized that food insecurity was one of the biggest challenges. And where a household cannot eat adequate food, they neither can drink adequate amounts of water. So either way, we already knew that they had iron availability in the community. And even with their preparation methods, the iron being bioavailable to their bodies was already adequate. So we had to sit down, and fortunate enough, we had the goodwill and understanding of the team on ground, the GOAL team, and the Innovation Hub. We had to redesign the entire strategy of getting into the community. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Noela. I think a lot of robust learnings from that one straight off the bat. We're going to go on to the next section, looking at failure as information. But if we can, maybe if we can keep the responses brief going forward, we'll try to tackle the remaining questions that we have for the session. Juliet, I'll turn this question to you. There's often a tension between innovating and learning in the humanitarian sector, and ALNAP has been studying humanitarian learning for decades. Can you give us an honest answer from your perspective? Has the sector genuinely gotten better at learning, or are we still paying for the same mistakes with different faces? What keeps these patterns repeating?
Thanks. Yeah. So I think this is an interesting question, because I'm not sure that I've really experienced the tension between innovation and learning, but the fact that the question's being asked means maybe there is one that I haven't seen. I think what I have seen is like there's kind of different tribes. There's the innovation tribe who mostly talk to other innovation people, and there's the learning people who mostly talk to the other learning people. And occasionally they kind of intersect. But I think there's also different funding streams also, which is part of maintaining that kind of difference. And I was thinking about it and wondering if actually, maybe because there's different people in different funding streams, there's probably a slightly different language that gets used in the two environments, and also potentially like different objectives that have been set for each. And I wonder if learning is seen as more fluffy typically, and perhaps innovation is seen as like a little bit cooler in tech. Maybe that's a bit of a stereotype. But on the question about whether the sector has got better at learning, we did a study a couple of years ago looking at what the trends in learning were over time. And what we found was that there were really strong trends of learning and contributing to improved performance on a kind of technical sector specific basis. So we are getting better at, and Noela gave some excellent examples, like, you know, we're getting better at nutrition interventions, we're getting better at wash interventions, we're getting better at cash interventions. So all of those are getting better. Where the learning pathway isn't so clear is on much more kind of system level learning issues, like on localization, on linking relief and development, and on the accountability to affected populations. That's where we see recommendations and evaluations now almost word for the word the same as they were 20 years ago. And the question is why? I think one reason is that it's within the control of individual agencies to make technical improvements. And also there's an incentive structure that incentivizes us to do that. So we call it single loop learning, or, you know, this term is single loop learning, where basically organizations get better at doing what they're already doing, rather than stepping back and saying, well, hang on, should we be doing these in the first place? Or, you know, those the sort of bigger questions. And also I think it's that, you know, we are incentivized to improve in our performance on things that sit comfortably within the sector's business model. The problem with the Nexus and AAP and localization is that they bump up against the business model of the humanitarian sector and don't fit comfortably within it. And I think that sits quite well with what we found also on innovation, is that innovation funding tends to be sector specific. It has tended to be sector specific over the last 10 years. And we found, when we looked into it, very few innovations that were cross-sectoral or looking at political solutions. So I think on the whole, innovation investment has sat within specific sectors. Also, most innovations that we found were tested in relatively easier operational contexts. So, you know, because it was more manageable, because it could be more contained, which I think is also quite interesting. Yeah, and that pattern will keep repeating. Is basically what we're finding. I mean, we're at a really interesting moment of change within the sector, where, you know, there's this kind of dual possibility around innovation. One is all the innovation money and teams going to be cut? You know, is that what we're experiencing? In which case we would see a deprioritization of innovation financing, or is there going to be this kind of resurgence of interest in innovation because we need to innovate our way out of this dramatic kind of funding shift in the sector? And nobody knows quite which way it's going to go. But I mean, innovation, like many other things, is a trend in the sector, where at certain points there will be an increase in innovation and increased funding opportunities and increased kind of potential for scaling innovation. And at other times it'll be less. Over.
Thanks very much, Juliet. We're certainly at a very interesting time for innovation. Hopefully through maybe some continued conversations like this, we can disrupt some of those patterns and to move forward in a new direction. So there's a version of Move Fast and Learn that works in innovation. So I'll ask, you know, for our colleagues on the call, in your work, the people you're testing with, they can't afford your learning curve. So how do you actually navigate that? And have you ever gotten it wrong? So if we can get some brief reflections from you, maybe Jose, we'll start with you.
Sure. Well, we already mentioned briefly before. So of course, the be fast and accurate, and that being the priority doesn't work in this sector. Okay, so we try to have like the principle of do no harm as the speed governor somehow. That plus the human in the loop, we've mentioned that before. Tino said before, that makes us understand that innovation needs to be human-centered, do no harm, and also to be locally driven. And it's not always easy. And I blame. I mean, I myself, like try to claim for locally driven innovation working from Spain. It's not always easy, and then we need to acknowledge that. I'm going to give a couple examples because, and also I'm going to contradict myself and also point out the mistakes we made. But for example, we do have a product in which we automate analysis with a human in the loop. Okay, and for example, yeah, it was slowed down. Do no harm meant to be slowed down in OPT. Like colleagues from OPT, part of the coordination structure said, hey guys, yes, we think it's quality. We don't think this is a moment to launch or scale this or make it entirely public. So we said, okay, locally driven, that's fine. For example, tomorrow we could scale up those situation hubs to 1,000, to 100 countries, but we know that we would lose that human, the human driven component of it. And then we have the opposite. Like for Myanmar, we had an interesting case that was we were wrong on the information, so we shared with partners in country. They flagged very quickly that some of the information was wrong, and we said, okay, these guys will never want to make this tool public. And then we said, okay, and then those were the same ones that pointed out and say, hey guys, we acknowledge the limitations. There is a massive lack of data, so let's go and public it. So again, and publish it. So being wrong doesn't always mean that it must not be worked on or made public. Again, it's avoid to be paternalistic in a way, and let those who need the data, because we work on data, to decide. So that would be our responsible layer.
Thanks very much, Jose. Tino, can we hear from you about how you and your teams are navigating the same situation?
Yeah, so as we never get tired of reminding people, break fast and move fast and break things is just not acceptable as a motto for us. Kobo serves about 35,000 organizations that use it for collecting data. It's about 250,000 active users per month. So that's a massive number of people who rely on us to not break things, to actually have a service that's reliable, so that when you collect data, it's still there tomorrow. Nothing gets broken into by intruders. You're not selling the data to others. The features you build your whole M&E framework around, you trained 100 people yesterday, will still work tomorrow. They're not just disappearing because some product or sales team decided it wasn't lucrative enough. So to us, that's a massive amount of responsibility that many of us share. And I think for us in the nonprofit world, in the humanitarian space in particular, that responsibility is in our DNA. And that's quite different from many private sector partners and even some that are marketing towards the humanitarian side. I think they don't have that. And I think that's a risk that sometimes using those kinds of solutions can really provide. But the way we guard against that, I would say, is number one, testing. We pilot with a lot of data. We pilot with our own projects internally. We use synthetic data. We do lots of test-driven development, other kinds of automated and manual testing, so that long before any solution goes into the hands of users, we are very sure that it works. So that means it takes a little bit of time before things are released. It means that, for example, we're building an AI-enabled form builder right now. What we're first going to do pilots ourselves with partners, for example, in Ethiopia this year, to make sure that the results, not only in the lab, but in the field, match what we would expect, so that the AI is measured against human experts. And only if we're satisfied and any kinds of remedies have been addressed, that's when we hit the release button. And only then, if we don't hit that quality mark, we will just not release it until we finally cross that mark, rather than being driven by a particular arbitrary timeline. And that's, to us, that's the standard that we always want to uphold. And that, yeah, we obviously encourage any organization, whether they're technology driven or an NGO building its own solution, it doesn't matter. And of course, private partners, to adopt that same sense of responsibility.
Thanks very much for that, Tino. And Noela, can we hear from you as well on how you and your teams have managed, trying to struggle with this learning curve, trying to move quickly and learn along the way? And has your team ever gotten it wrong?
Oh, absolutely. We have got it wrong several times and we pick up. But in this journey, we have learned that moving fast for us is about listening, not just marketing and distributing of our products or selling our services. And learning for us is learning through the community voices or our clients' voices, so that it's not necessarily just, so we do a lot of product sales and testings and trials, yeah? But also adopting our supply chains to the social and cultural realities of our clients or our consumers, so that it's not just the technical services or what we're sharing. And therefore, move fast and learn. I think that statement should not be used generically, because we recognize that the responsibilities of people we work with around innovations vary. And these vary based on the RASI, where R is who is responsible, A, who is accountable, C, who do we communicate to? And then what information are we communicating to regarding the innovations? So we often do a lot of monitoring along the way as we implement, either in phases, we monitor, report, get our learnings, and redefine for our success. And that's how we and my team and I work around it. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Noela. Thank you. Now, it's clear from the reflections that it's not necessarily just about kind of getting things out there as fast as possible, but making sure that we have evidence and data to support the products that we're putting on out there. So thank you. Juliet, from the research evidence and experience of working directly with local partners and leaders, what have you learned that the sector doesn't want to hear about how localization actually works? And where do good intentions consistently collapse into the same old power dynamics?
So this is like the big question that the whole sector is trying to grapple with at the moment in this whole
so
kind of moment of change. So I won't go into the whole thing. I mean, fundamentally, we've got a sector that was built for speed and scale, that wants to have, a very kind of mass responses, whilst also asking itself to have a more nuanced and, individually curated response. And these two things are bumping into each other. And then you add into the mix the kind of vested interests of organizations, the unwillingness to cede power, regardless of how good the rhetoric can be, and also the concentration of resources in our sector, which basically isn't changing. So you've still got few donors funding few significant sized organizations. And the reality is that the sector doesn't yet know how to fund a more diverse range of actors. And there's interesting things around pool fund ecosystems that could be really super interesting, but the sector is yet to really make that leap in any meaningful way. I think in terms of innovation and learning, what's really interesting is that a lot of local knowledge is invisible to the humanitarian sector. So a lot of the learning, innovation, adaptation, and change that is happening naturally, quickly, fluidly within every project actually is largely invisible and is just sort of assumed. But a large part of what we try to do at ALNAP is give visibility to that learning and change and innovation that's already happening. But there's also the same power dynamics in localization in the operational and decision-making sense exist exactly in the knowledge part of the sector as well. So there is an inherent prejudice towards more northern generated knowledge and away from more southern generated, or southern, sorry, poor term, but more locally generated knowledge. Project level innovation and project level learning is largely unfunded. Same as South-South learning and South-South exchange on innovation is largely unfunded. So you've still got this northern dominance of knowledge and innovation that is actually, some would say, stifling more natural forms of innovation and knowledge generation and knowledge sharing that could be coming directly from the projects. And I think a great innovation would be to look at how to better use the information technologies and everything that we have within our power to really enable a better, more natural and more fluid and real-time exchange and visibility of all that kind of innovation and change that is happening. And that's, I think, the next stage of the localization discussion is around knowledge and respect for a broader range of knowledge than we kind of currently have within our system.
Thanks very much for that, Juliet. And Noela, I'd love to hear some of your experiences as a local innovator and implementer, working in northern Uganda. How does this align with your experience of localization put in practice?
How it aligns with my experience as a team leader at Devine Organic Food, but also working with other SMEs in the nutrition space, doing tremendous work, is as long as we contextualize the community setting, appreciate their needs, then innovation can actually be turned to address their needs. And for us, we have worked in different communities, not only in northern Uganda, and different communities in Uganda have different cultural settings. So we really go deep down to understand who our target market is, what their need is, and particularly if it's for the women of reproductive age, how do they perceive a particular product? So if it's an innovative product in this case, how do they perceive it? And then we work around influencing them either with the government officials, particularly health workers, the health government workers, or their cultural leaders, or their political leaders as well, to ensure that we bring the innovation to the reality and to meet the need that it is meant for. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you very much, Noela. We've heard a lot of very interesting reflections from all on the panel today. So I'd like to have us finish up with one last question, and each will have an opportunity to respond. So briefly, if you could make one structural change to how the humanitarian sector treats innovation and learning, not just at your organization, but sector-wide, and you knew it would actually stick, what would that change be? I'll start with José.
All right. Okay. So broad, a complicated question. So I would say let's, praise the learning and not just the novelty. And yeah, it's a sector that celebrates new pilots, new tools, new ideas, and treats them as the whole story of innovation. And also, that has to do with donors. So I would say like trying to move to a more to a system that consolidates innovation. I know it's less attractive, if you need a headline, but it's much more needed, it's much more efficient, and it can be more easily locally driven. So I would say if I had to change something, I would say like to redefine what a success story looks like when it comes to innovation. And like a documented case of we saw something that wasn't working, we learned, we struggled, but we managed to do it in cooperation with other partners. And now here it is, something to be sustained, that is useful, that saves lives. We need to advocate for that.
That's great. Thanks very much, José. And Noela, let's hear from you. What would be one change in one sentence, a change you'd make to the sector on innovation and learning?
Innovate with the end users rather than for them, ensuring that their knowledge, their perspectives, and their contributions are all integrated into the process. And also have the development partner or funder hearing this process and these steps. So, yeah.
Great, thanks. That's a great suggestion, I think, for sure. Thanks, Noela. And Tino, to you next.
Yeah, I would perhaps take a different angle. I would say, because we're talking about failure today, and I think this is a wonderful event, and thank you for organizing it, but I would say every failure, or even just partial failure, like the ones we discussed earlier, because they're like successes wrapped in the failures wrapped in the I think it should be incumbent on donors, and of course the organizations doing the innovation, particularly nonprofits using public funds, to systematically publish them. And I think there should be a failure as data approach where we have a repository on these things, because we all learn more from failure than from success, and therefore the more we talk about it, the more it becomes normalized, and the more we publish failure, the better we can actually do innovation in the future.
Mm-hmm. And that's great, and avoid the mistakes of the past. Right. And Juliet, we'll finish up with your reflection on the structural change you'd make to the sector.
I would, with my magic wand, create greater investment in sharing platforms to give greater visibility to national level innovation and projects without being tied to funding streams and without having to go through the intermediary of a northern institution. So really kind of creating more space and opportunity for national and local experiences within a sharing culture.
Great, thanks very much for that, Juliet. We're approaching the last 7 minutes of the discussion, but we've gotten a couple of questions that we've received from the audience. So I'll read them aloud. I'll read the first one aloud and then open it up to the panelists to respond. We have one question. As donor-funded institutions, we often find ourselves over-complying with requirements, which can limit the ability to innovate. What practical advice would you give to help organizations step out of this comfort zone and foster a culture of innovation while still maintaining accountability? I'll leave that open to the panelists.
I typed a little response to Mohammed, but in case, I mean, the problem is I think there's no easy answer to that. There's this potential to negotiate with funders. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I think there are funds that are particularly good at funding innovation, sometimes within the traditional donors, particularly where you've got a real innovation champion within a donor itself. But also the philanthropies some are increasingly positioning themselves as sector disruptors, and there they have a different attitude potentially and a different appetite. And again, some of them are getting really good at small grants with no ties, which gives a total space and freedom if you can find them. They're few and far between. They rely on personal relationships, and they're like hen's teeth. If you can find them, they're amazing.
But the practical advice is to try to build up those relationships. Right. We've got another question from the chat from Molly. Where do feedback loops most commonly break down in humanitarian innovation? And have they ever chosen not to act on data, and why? Yes, Jose, come on in.
Okay, so it's a great question, and thing is like sometimes it goes under the surface, because at least, for example, when it comes to those software or data or or IT products, the undocumented or unaddressed feedback usually leads to abandonment of certain platforms or initiatives. So you don't see the feedback being implemented because users just stop being users, and it goes. I mean, it will not make it to the news, like the fact that you just abandoned an idea, so it just dilutes, and it's extremely negative. Why? Because not because of your own failure. Again, I don't mind failing myself, but it doesn't allow the next one to come to actually not repeat your own mistakes. So I think it's a great question, and it's one of the it's a huge problem we have, that we do not recognize or publicly state our not so successful stories.
That's great. Thanks very much for that, Jose. And the next question that we have is, how about working with research institutions and universities when coming to innovation and learning in the humanitarian sector? Are we seeing success with this?
I briefly, I guess the truth is absolutely. Some of our best conversations and suggestions come out of that sector. We have a lot of enthusiastic students and medical students and researchers of all ranges and seniority. There's a lot of good ideas. Sometimes they rely on the humanitarian sector because it's really hard for academics to actually understand the field and gain access. And so the close collaboration between the academic and humanitarian sector, as long as it's possible and ethical, obviously, is a mutual beneficial collaboration. At the same time, we are obviously there's a reason for the stereotype of the ivory tower academic. I think there's a tendency to overthink and be quite slow because that's how you want to be really certain about your data. So that can hold back certain ideas, and that can then be detrimental to the whole idea of moving as quickly as you can to address a problem that you know is time sensitive. So the real challenge, as we know from the humanitarian sector, is how to break that cycle, and perhaps you can't. Maybe the academic sector isn't built on that speed, but therefore we need to bring, I guess, the academic or the research thinking into humanitarian organizations. I think few organizations have really built internal research capacities to inherit the goals of an academic partner, but not rely on them entirely, because then you continue to be dependent on that slower timeline and perhaps extremely strict, again, for good reason, but perhaps overly strict ethical review boards that are not built for the practical environments of working in South Sudan, let's say.
No, I think that's a great point. It can be useful for the evidence base, but also has its own complexities, adding another stakeholder into the mix. Right. Well, thank you very much, everyone. I think that's all the time that we're going to have for questions as we're approaching the top of the hour. Before I let everyone go, I just wanted to take a moment because I think there's something really important that's happened here today. What struck me the most is that from all the stories that we heard, they all followed a similar shape. You know, we started with a confident assumption, a reality that dismantled it, and teams that chose to stay with the problem instead of just walking away. That's not a small thing and definitely takes a lot of courage, as well as a culture that actually allows for it. So I'd like to thank our speakers, Juliet Parker from ALNAP, for giving us honest, research-backed truth that the sector doesn't always want to hear, and for helping us to connect today's stories to the bigger patterns that keep on repeating. Tino Kreutzer from KoboToolbox for showing us that moving fast and being responsible aren't opposites, and that no matter how well you design something, the field will always have something to say about it. From Noela Ojara from Devine Organic Foods for bringing us into the lived reality of innovation in northern Uganda, and for reminding us that community trust is not a given and it has to be earned every single time. And from José Cobos Romero from Data Friendly Space for making the case clearly and honestly that failure documented is failure transformed, and that a culture of learning has to be built and not assumed. For everyone attending, a follow-up will land in your inbox after the session at the email address that you've registered with. It'll include resources shared by our speakers today and any relevant links from the conversation. This is the first in what we hope will be an ongoing series. So if something resonated with you today, or if you're finally ready to submit that failure story, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you all for being here. Take care.